Allen police tonight identified the two brothers and family members police say they killed before committing suicide. I'm Clarice Tinsley. The bodies were found after someone became worried about that family. Police say a detailed suicide note was left behind. Fox 4's David Santendry is in Allen with more. David.
Clarice, this is an area that's not used to experiencing violent crime, so you can imagine people were completely caught off guard when they realized that at this house behind me, police say two young men killed 4 family members and then themselves. I spoke with a handful of people who were out here today, including 2 young women who say they grew up with the 2 young men. They say they learned about what happened over social media. An entire family is dead, and Allen police believe 2 sons, 19-year-old Farhan and 21-year-old Tanveer Tawhid, shot and killed their father, Tawhid al-Islam, sister Farbin Tawhid, mother Irene Islam, and grandmother Altafon Nessa, who is not seen in this picture, before killing themselves. The Bangladesh Association of North Texas provided the family photo.
The sweetest family I've ever known, and every single one of them was amazing. That's how they're known.
Faiza Rahman says she was close friends with Farhan, who police say posted a suicide note to his Instagram account.
I think it was for me and Faiza and his close friends.
One friend notified police. The bodies were found during a welfare check early Monday morning at the home off Pine Bluff Drive.
I haven't mended the 2 versions of him in my head yet. The one who I knew and was so close with and would talk to for hours on end about anything, and the one that did this.
In the note, Farhan details depression since 9th grade and the first time he cut himself, later saying the only reason for existence is happiness and that he shouldn't live if he's not happy.
There had been treatment for depression. There had been medication.
Farhan and his 21-year-old brother, who the note says also battled depression, planned to kill themselves but wanted to also kill their loved ones, according to the note. Reading, they would spend the rest of their lives feeling guilt, despair. I could just do them a favor and take them with me.
This was supposed to be him showing how much he loved them. And I know it doesn't make sense to us.
Friends say they knew he previously cut himself.
He said that it was something that was not happening currently.
The families were from Bangladesh, belonging to a number of DFW groups related to their background. Many are gathering outside their home Monday, regretting they never saw this coming.
It definitely wasn't something that we could have seen happening.
Police say that according to the note, the 21-year-old brother is the one who recently purchased the gun that was used in the killings. But at the same time, police say their investigation is still ongoing and there's plenty more they expect to uncover.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Moss, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. If you saw the lead in, it felt a little bit like a news program. Sometimes all news is not good news. The family that perished, returned to Allah. They were in Allen, Texas, north of Dallas, Texas. And I really wanted to take an opportunity to really talk about it. And really kind of parse away some of the things that are going on. This is of course tragic, but it's not isolated. It's not isolated, and we're not talking about it enough, if you will. The scope, the possibility, and the potentiality of children hurting themselves. Understanding in some regards that we're not able to reach them like we want to. Like as Muslims, we think we can reach them with Quran and Sunnah. And yes, those are important. But there are so many things that are tugging at the heartstrings of our youth. There's so many things that permeate the life of youth. I mean, I make no bones about it that being a youth these days is very complicated because you have so many different variances on what's the truth, what's not the truth, how people treat each other, the world in general. And as I watch this, this is familiar with me. Many that I was in social services, I was a school teacher, and it kind of took me back to that, if you will. And when I say kind of took me back to that, there's, though I don't know all the ramifications of this situation, just the two ideas, that the two words, murder, suicide, just giving gravity to murder, suicide, which is, an intentional loss of life in both categories. But the murder is not sanctioned. The murder is not approved by the person that's killed, the victim. That's a victim crime. And so I began to back up off of, and I looked at some of my relationships with a lot of youth in my family, youth I grew up with, kids I counseled. And, while we've been doing the ShOUT show for heading into a year now, as much as I'm a child advocate, I have to say, I have to call myself out as a hypocrite because I haven't done enough shows about our youth. I hint about it, but the hints are more given in a space where the youth should be already doing this thing and not really drilling down on the fact that, some of our youth are not able to, I want to say, take advantage of possibilities and opportunities. And it's not that they're not smart. It's not that they're articulate and not intellectual. It's just there are things that hold them back. There are things that hold them back. We have to realize that as adults, we have things that hold us back, but we have outlets to do things as adults. Just imagine that you're a child and you have things that hold you back and you don't have those outlets. And as I began to read about this case, that the murders, this was a family. This is a generation of grandmother, mother and father, sister, and two brothers. They're gone right now. And we mourn that, but I want to do a little bit more than mourn today. I want to talk about what we could possibly be doing, including myself, beginning with myself, that we can look a little bit more for warning signs. And I'm going to tell you something. Looking for warning signs with youth these days is even more difficult because I look at what their influences are, and influences are so many things. Some of them you see and some of them you don't see. And the idea of a young man saying he's been dealing with depression since 9th grade is scary. It's downright scary. And I'm not saying the depression scare is the fact that he doesn't feel like he's healthy. He doesn't feel like he's fully engaged with creation and environment around him. So the things that could and should and normally would make him happy, he has reservations about, or she has reservations about. She has doubts about. I remember reading about a young girl who was a TikTok star who ended her life. And you begin to say, well, what is essentially going on? Like, why are we going down this path? And I realized that my youth was different. My youth was different. And I have to say, not in a good way, a bad way, or easier, or my youth was different because, my parents, I was tied to my parents' youth a little bit more. So on that side, I began to understand what they did, not to grow up, not to just be kids, but what they did in terms of investments to expand into adulthood, to become adults, functioning adults. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, they had these pristine backgrounds. Both my parents grew up relatively poor, modest living, if you will. We weren't rich as a child. We weren't rich, but, we were okay. We were blessed. And even when they didn't have things, when they were children, they still found a way to be blessed and they connected to that. So before I get into this, I'm going to actually welcome anybody that's coming on the show. This is kind of a different mood. And I'll tell you why I'm doing the show like this, because I'm supposed to. I'm literally supposed to. If I didn't do it and I came on with some, hey, let's tell jokes, I'd be lying to you that somehow that this did not affect me. This affected me. You know, loss of life, particularly youth, is difficult, but I'm still trying to process the loss of an entire family. You see what I'm saying? So before we get deep into this, and I apologize for rambling, but I'm still trying to collect my thoughts. So let me welcome anybody that's coming on the show for the first time. If this is something that's a little bit heavy for you, it's okay. I understand if you want to not be a part of the show, not watch, not view, I understand. Not even have to support the show. So I'm not going to ask anybody to click the subscription button, notification button, or the like button. It's not one of those shows, okay? That's number one. If you'd like to stay and you want to contribute, we do value all opinions on the show. So the way you do that is we give out shout outs, which I'm still going to do because it does have a lot to do with our topic today. But if you want to stick around, please get in the comment section, be a part of the conversation. While I say I'm the host, Preacher Moss, I'm not the owner of the platform. The owner of the platform is life. Life, how we experience it, life, how we see it, life, how we share it. So let me get started. Let me quickly introduce our people. Big shout out to Sister E. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to see that you're feeling better. That turkey lasagna was amazing. I think you put you put a lot of love in that turkey lasagna. It was amazing. I had a very good time with it. Thank you again, and I humbly appreciate your generosity. Next, we have Sister Rabina Chowdhury, our unofficial research director for the Shout Out Show. Sister Rabina, I would love to get some of your insights on this. Thank you so much for coming on the show and always being a supporter of the SOS and the Shout Out Show family by sharing your insights. I appreciate you and thank you so much for coming. Brother Altaf Rashid, our ambassador from Canada. Thank you so much, Brother Altaf. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To everybody, especially to you as well, man. Thank you so much for joining our family. No, not joining our family, but being a part of our family and contributing to our family here on the Shout Out Show. We appreciate you, brother. And don't ever think that we don't. And next we have Sister Aika coming all the way from Indonesia. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister Aika, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and we appreciate your presence as well. Brother Eric Carter, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the Shout Out Show. This is a different topic, but I'm sure you can relate. Anybody who has a heartbeat can relate to this kind of loss, and we're going to try and facilitate a little bit talking about it. I'm not going to go too much into the details of the case, the crime, the tragedy, if you will, but I am going to frame some things around how our heart works, how our minds work, particularly talking about youth. So, Brother Eric, thank you again, sir. Tip of the hat to you. Thank you for coming on the show. And Sister Sultana, who is running the back, I appreciate you as always. Like I said, this show does not run smoothly or at all without the assistance of Sister Sultana, our consultant producer from day one fun one. She has been at the helm of the Shout Out Show, so we definitely appreciate that. Let's get to our topic today. Okay. Yes, there you go, Sister Rabina. The moment that child put out a suicide note on social media, he was telling the world he is a threat to himself and others. Therefore, alarm bells should have been rung immediately. I agree with that, but a lot of times in those situations, that's the last thing they do. Children like to work out, and like adults, we have a scenario, a situation where we deal with a particular crisis. And what we want to do is try and work out that crisis as best we can before we take it to someone else, because we're worried about someone's going to think differently than me or somebody's going to judge me. The whole idea of putting out a suicide note on social media is I'm not surprised. But I think he put it out on social media because he probably felt like he wasn't being listened to. I looked at his thing on social media. You know what it said? It said 0 post. And then in this caption it says suicide note. This young man had been literally crying out for help. And let's also go to the fact that They were not young kids. They were not 14, 15 years old. These were two brothers. One was 19, one was 21. So there's also a aspect of how they're engaging in adulthood because they are legitimate adults. You know, they are legitimate young men. Both of them attending college at University of Texas in Austin, a prestigious school. But somewhere along the line, it's not enough. Somewhere along the line, it's not enough. Satana, can you bring up a topic, our banner for today, if you don't mind? Exploring flexibility in your life. I spent a lot of years working with troubled youth. And one of the things that troubled youth always had a problem with was understanding the narrative of time. Time. There was either the idea that time had passed them by, they didn't have enough time, or time stood still. Think about the thing that I just said, the stages of time. You know, time had passed them by, they didn't have enough time, and time had stood still. Or the last one is nobody had time for them. And a lot of times in counseling, you have to be able to have children begin to look at flexibility and how they think, hoping that it gives them flexibility in how they feel. A big part of therapy is understanding how the thought process works for people. Like in alcoholism or alcohol or substance abuse, it is understanding that the chemicals in this regard affect how you think and how you react to creation, environment around you. With youth, it is such a scary narrative now because a child can be damaged early on and we won't know. A child can be traumatized really early on and we don't know. You know, we look at things that happen when people get to be adults and they say, what's wrong with that person? Why they? And we realize that, you know, that person might be a superstar, but in that space, somewhere in that childhood, that lead up to adulthood, something went wrong. Something went wrong. And in the absence of being able to explain to a child what went wrong, which requires an incredible amount of luck, to say, to be there at the time that this thing goes awry, a child is left to reason, if you will, what happened to them. Was it my fault? Was it their fault? And I think in that space, you know, there's a loss of flexibility. A lot of times when we talk about flexibility, you know what it's tied to? It's tied to the workplace. Oh, I appreciate you having flexibility so I can, you know, I can leave a little early. I can go see my mom or something like that. It's tied to the workplace. And flexibility is also tied to a character narrative. You know, that person is flexible. That person is not flexible. But you know what it's not really tied to? It's not really tied to the idea that a young man or young woman has the flexibility to explore themselves, explore their feelings to the point where I can look whether there are opportunities and potential, or I could be critical, self-critical, and say these are the things that maybe will allow me to engage a certain way or gauge a certain way. You know, it's so much stress. Look at education. You know, I remember when I went to school, like a lot of people, I didn't want to go to a small school. I wanted to go to D1 school in hope of playing sports at a D1 college. It didn't work out. But there was a guy, my freshman year, I had to go to a program called FFP, Freshman Frontier Program. And I went to FFP. And there was a guy there. We're talking about being, you know, I was 17. So I was probably the youngest one there. But most of the other people there were of age that they could drink, 18 years old in the state of Wisconsin. And I remember there was a guy named Matthew Cardelio. And at 18, 19 years old, he literally tried to drink himself to death. And while I had seen this kind of destruction and attitude in my family, it was never to the point where you see somebody want to do it to death. See a relative was drunk, that's something. That was to see a wino drunk or something. But this person had a death wish with this alcohol. And to make it even more extravagant, if you will, or complex, if you will, was that this was a white kid from the suburbs. So I wasn't exposed to white kids from the suburbs who had problems that were so devastating that they would literally drink. It wasn't like I'm gonna have a drink. It was like I'm going to drink till I'm sloppy, messy, drunk to the point where if I walk down the street, I might get killed because I wandered in front of a bus. It was that type of thing. And what we got to him when he finally, he never dried out. He wound up flunking out of school. But one day he said, I don't think I have the capacity to make it. And we asked what? And we hadn't even started school yet. Matthew said, I don't think I have the capacity to make it. And in my 17-year-old mind, I was like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to make it. You young. You passed your SATs. And I'm looking beyond, but this is a 17-year-old mind. And it's a 17-year-old mind that's been engaged, if you will, that I've had opportunities to explore flexibility in my life, who my friends were, where I wanted to go to school. I chose where I wanted to go to school. I chose my friends, good, bad, and in between. I had a program. Even when I was 17 years old, I knew I wanted to be a comedian. So it wasn't a thing. You know, I was like, I'm going to go ahead and get this degree so my mama will be happy and we can hang it on the wall. But this is what I really wanted to do. I wanted to engage my creativity. And my mother, my father understood, you know, to an extent, they understood. They worried, though, because sometimes that wanting to engage, that flexibility in your life and go do these other things, sometimes there's a downfall. That downfall is maybe you're not successful. And it can lead you to behaviors. It can lead you to situations, scenarios where you start doubting yourself and your ability to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You doubt your own ethic in some regards. And so when you start about that, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, little brother. Glad to see you on the show. All right. Assalamu alaikum, Mama Son. Sad the son thought he was relieving family of hurt and harm by killing them. May God bless their memories. Yeah. But let me throw this out. That in that young man's mind, what we just read and what we just saw somehow was balanced to him. It was rational thought. Hear me now. Somehow it was balanced and rational thought to him that killing his family was a mercy. He didn't want them to suffer when he left. So he said, I'll take you with me so we don't suffer at all. Somehow it's balanced, it's nuanced in his mind to the point where it made sense and it led to action. Can we put up Sister Rabina's thing? Instant gratification under the guise of social media is often mistaken for happiness, whereas it's becoming more and more blurred and difficult. Yeah, reality is blurred and difficult. You are true. And the South Asian families are not usually open to mental illness, psychiatric treatment, etc. There's definitely more to the story, especially the fact that they felt so guilty about leaving their family behind. These young men obliterated them all. Yeah, the African American community, we could be really hard on mental health. And in the last, I want to say maybe 10 years, we've come to the grips that, we have a mental health issue amongst our youth because we started having growing numbers of suicide. For a long time, you didn't have to worry about a young black man committing suicide. The police would kill him. But then we began to see a lot more of the fact that our youth were coming through situations, scenarios where they were really scarred. Where sometimes I find that I've said things to youth and I regret them. I mean, they make me cringe because I'm working on the premise of be tough, hit them in the chest, be a man, be tough. And that was probably the worst thing I could do. But I'm thinking it worked for me. Sadly, you began to understand that our parents, as great as they are, many of them suffered all kind of trauma just growing up in a racist society. You can't come out of there unscathed. There are things that my mother and my father will never be able to tell me about race in America because it's just too painful. Because it may make me doubt the existence of whether I can be. This is real. You know, Black parents will talk about racism. They're never going to tell you exactly what it is because they don't want you to believe that you can't make it. And that's an interesting thing because you have to hold that in because it's a truth you want to say, but it's a truth that could be devastating, particularly at a young age. It could be absolutely devastating. This family, to Sister Rabina's point, this family was engaged in all kinds of things in Dallas. They were engaged in Bangladeshi Association. I'm pretty sure they had a mosque presence and things like that. But, you know, it's not enough. You begin to look at this whole thing and it's just this weird competition. You're competing with the TV, you're competing with social media, you're competing with reality TV, you're competing with news, and that all that competition reduces flexibility. You know, I said earlier, and I always bring up my teachers, Miss Jones and Mr. John, Miss Prather. You know, one of my mentors, his name is Harry Weber. You've heard me talk about Harry Weber. And Harry said something years ago that I remember. He said, preach. He said, one of the things that's held people back, not Black people, he said people back, is that folks felt like they didn't have enough room in their lives to turn it around. And I said, what do you mean? He said, people believe if I'm in a phone booth and I close the phone booth, and it's snug, I can't turn around and open that phone booth. And I said, I don't understand. He said, metaphorically, whatever space you get yourself into, tight space, wide space, he said, understand, if there's a space, there's an opportunity to move in that space. He said, because even if you try to move in that space, what's the first thing you're going to do in that space? You're going to think of opportunities. You're going to think of solutions. And he said, the way the world works, because he was an advertiser, he said, the way the world works, for me to sell you a product, if you will, or try to make you a consumer of what I'm offering or my goods, is that I have to become a magician. I have to be very efficient of making you think that you can't think in that space. He was talking about adults, right? He was talking about adults. Can you imagine what it is for a child? 6, 7, 8 years old. If you ever go to juvenile detention and hear some of the stories of these kids, these are horrific stories. I started working in 1988 with at-risk youth, adjudicated youth, during the height of the crack wars in Washington, D.C., and going to their homes to pick them up and doing home visits cemented in my heart that whatever I was going to do for these kids as a comedian, as an advocate, as a teacher, in my heart, I knew that it wasn't going to be enough, that it was not going to be enough, that I would never fool myself into thinking that I've solved this problem. I may resolve some things, but I would never solve that problem because it's too deep. It's too long. It's too expansive. And in that, there was humility. You know, one of the things about exploring flexibility in your life is if you do it often, you will find that your life is not as significant as you think it is. You will develop a modality of humility, if you will, that will allow you to shrink down and see the rest of the world. It'll allow you to shrink down and see the rest of the world. I'm in my first year teaching. When I went to a kid's house and the mother made dinner and she made some food, I didn't care for it much. But I remember something that my mother said, something my grandmother said, that this woman made this food with the intention of sharing. And she had to look around at her other children and say, listen, Mr. Moss is coming by today. we're all going to eat a little less so he can have some. And in the back of my mind, when she offered me that plate, I acted like it was a piece of filet mignon. It wasn't nothing but some fried chicken and some little potatoes. But I treated it like it was chicken cordon bleu, halal, of course, filet mignon, prime rib. And I ate it. And every chew, I let this lady know that I appreciated it. Why? We don't know what her and her family were going through in terms of just putting food on the table. And so I'm going to be the first to say, I've been wrong, and I've been wrong often. At times I could say I've been hypocritical because I haven't done everything I need to be doing. And I pray to Allah that I get better at doing it. But you know what? For this case, let's not assume that things are okay. Now, let's not assume that things are okay. I'm not just saying talking to our youth. I'm talking about to one another. Let's just not assume that everything is all right because we get on a shout out show and we send salutations. We don't know how people are living. We don't. We send kids to school and we assume they're going to get your education, come back. School is a hard grind. School is a tough place. It's competitive. Kids are not as nice as they used to be. And nice kids get swallowed up, and rotten kids seem to be rewarded. But that's not my point. My point is, I would like to take the lead. Well, I want to humble myself. I want to humble myself because this thing that happened in Allen, Texas hurt. It didn't matter. I didn't know any of the people, but it hurt. So I'm going to wrap up there. Let's give a shout out to our sponsor. Our sponsor is BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com, who's been sponsoring us and helping us with our show. Big shout out to Miss Attorney Maxine B. Cade. We appreciate you. If you don't want to go to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com, maybe you don't have your computer, you can call at 1-800-679-3175. Again, that's 1-800-679-3175. She is waiting by the phone. Give a call. So, brothers and sisters, we're going to wrap on that. And I'm going to meditate on this. But I'm going to ask everybody, let's engage in flexibility in our life. And I don't mean workforce, work balance, flexibility. I mean, really our life choices and how we can expand and not only make our lives better, make the lives better around us, if you will. And investigate and ask the question beyond hello. Ask, how are you doing? And let's mean it. So blessings to the family in Dallas. And I pray that Allah shows you mercy and gives you the highest of reaches in Jannah, forgives your bad deeds, accepts your good deeds, and gives you the highest reaches of Jannah. That's our show for today. Everybody take care. Have a blessed day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your shout out show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next shout out show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from Tarif Attar. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out tarifattar.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.